Welcome to Transqat. I'm Claire McCarthy. I met Tran at the Transtape booth this past January at the TCNE First Event Conference in Boston. That was episode 16, I think, for those keeping track. We started talking about the many uses of the product, and I realized that I had the makings of a wicked pissa podcast episode. I was in Boston, so at the time it seemed appropriate to use a phrase like that. Little did I know that I was talking to a celebrity. In addition to being the education and outreach director for Transtape, Quyen is also a drag king, performing under the name Jaden Jameson. Jaden was named Mr. Gay United States Male Illusionist 2016 and Mr. Boston Pride 2017. He appears in the 2017 documentary Kings, Queens, and In-Betweens. Quyen, I apologize. If I had known I was standing there next to royalty, I'd have genuflected. Fair warning, listeners, this episode acknowledges that sex exists, and at times the discussion wanders into the role of specific body parts in gender presentation. Nothing prurient, I promise. Just wanted to give you a heads up. Hope you enjoy the conversation. I've actually never talked to a drag king before. Okay. So when you lip sync, I mean, I have a sense of what drag queens lip sync to. Mm-hmm. What kinds of songs do you...
Well, drag has evolved so much because it is representative of what we're seeing in everyday life. And if you've noticed, the lines of gender have been blurred a lot. So back in the day, it used to be just two genders, male or female. You had to be one or the other, and there was like a hard line. But nowadays, you're seeing a lot of individuals who are gender variant or fluctuate in between. And it's kind of sexy because you're like, I don't know what gender you are or where you fall in there, but I like the ambiguity.
It's working.
Yeah, it's hot.
Yeah.
And so that's where you're seeing the influence in drag, because you'll see an individual on stage. You're like, I don't know which energy they're serving. And they'll sing maybe a song in a women's voice or a men's voice, but it doesn't matter anymore. So there's this crossover that's happening, which is super hot. But I typically am the high glam, over the top, emotional person. Like last night, like Adam Lambert is my that, he was one of the first attractive out gay men who played with femininity and masculinity and with the makeup and the glam. So he allowed me to be that throughout, that masculine energy, but still being soft femme,
Oh, wow. Okay.
And the thing I like about drag is that, especially back in the day, you see drag queens, but you often see heterosexuality played out, and these are gay venues. And so I was like, these gay men don't see positive depictions of themselves anywhere.
And so they're performing the gender that society has said these are the two options.
Right. And so I wanted to go in there and present a different type of visibility in every single aspect. Number one, as an Asian person who doesn't get representation in the gay community, number one. Two, homosexuality being portrayed by a drag king for the gay men so they could see themselves portrayed in a positive light.
Oh, wow.
Gay male love is a sexy, beautiful thing that they rarely see in regular mainstream. I wanted them to see themselves up there on that stage as well. And that's what a lot of drag kings do in communities, because we bring a different type of diversity that breaks down stereotypes that the drag industry is not for so-and-so said person or whatever. Because typically, someone says drag, you automatically imagine a white drag queen portrayed by a cis gay male. How often do you see any other type of diversity portrayed in the drag scene?
Right. Yeah. I mean, RuPaul brought a certain degree of diversity through their presentation, but then also through the contestants on Drag Race, I guess. But
she's also still very limited. She has had some transphobic things, and she refuses to cast drag kings.
Oh, now see, I forget who I was just admitting this to recently, but I have never watched RuPaul's Drag Race, and I am ashamed. You're looking.
No. I don't watch it either, because it's still, the show itself maintains that hierarchy in the drag industry and exclusivity and keeping out anyone who is not falls within that drag queen label. So it's not helping. She has helped with the mainstream, but for those of us others who don't fall in that, we're still left out of that.
Well, we're jumping right in here, apparently. But Quyen, let me first welcome you to Transqat and ask you to just introduce yourself.
Okay, so my name is Quyen Tran. My pronouns are she, her, hers in this form. And we met at the first event conference for trans, put on by the Transgender Coalition of New England.
It's coalition or community
Community,
or
yeah.
something. I wasn't paying attention. I'm sorry.
No worries. It's TCNE. And so that's where we met because my job actually is I work for Transtape. I am the education and outreach coordinator. And if you're not familiar with Transtape, it is a gender-affirming medical grade adhesive that most people associate with chest binding, but you can also pack and tuck with the product as well. So that's what I do in my regular life. And then my nightlife is I double as a drag king, Jaden Jameson, on stage.
Jaden Jameson.
Yeah, I thought, well, it was modeled off the name of Jenna Jameson.
Oh, right.
And I've been in the game for 18 plus years. So she was big when I decided I was going to be a star. And I thought I was going to be hot like Jenna
You were going to be able to ride those coattails.
Yeah, and it turned out, I thought I was going to be a stud, but wah, wah, wah.
Well, let's go back. Give me a little background, a little history on that. How long have you been doing that? What brought you to it?
Okay, so I have a very interesting, funny, weird story. So I've been performing as a drag king for 18 plus years, and I didn't know that drag king things were a thing until when I went to grad school in Ohio. Apparently, Columbus, Ohio is a hotbed of drag, and
Really?
no one would know it, but yes, it is a hotbed for drag. And so I went to grad school in Ohio, and that was at the time where I figured out that I was gay. And so I was trying to find community. And so, of course, back in the day, you go to the gay bars for the community to be with others like yourself. And so drag king shows were a thing there. And that's the first time I realized, like, wow. And there was a drag king troupe called the Royal Renegades. And I went to their show and I saw what they were doing. I was like, I'm a kind of a ham too. I think I can do that.
I could do that.
And leaning, it was very appealing to lean into the masculinity. I come out of, I'm from an immigrant family. I'm a refugee. So my family and I came over in 1980, and I'm what you call fresh off the boat, FOB, back in the day, boat family. And I grew up in a dynamic where I constantly heard, you're a girl, you don't do this, you don't do this, you don't do this. Whereas my brothers were given a free pass and everything. And I would see this, what was happening in front of my eyes, even though, trying to make it as a woman in America, you have to be just as good or as aggressive because the way, society has been set up. So, my femininity was being sold to me as not a good thing because my opportunities were being limited.
If you were to follow that deferential femininity that is still entrenched in this culture, that you were going to limit yourself. Now, was that sort of gender clash just after you got to the States, or originally were you finding the same sort of limitations before you came?
I got to the States when I was 3, so I don't have much. So I don't remember much prior to that.
Fine. We'll just talk about the post-3 experience.
So I was struggling under, up to that point, like being limited because I was a woman, and my parents trying to mold me into this traditional subservient passive woman, and I wasn't having any of it. I was quite the tomboy, so I was probably the one that broke the mold. I was 1 out of 7, number 6 in the lineup.
Oh, wow.
And so I followed 4 boys in birth order, so anytime they wanted a 5th player in the backyard, I was there. And it's funny, I tell people this story because I'm a public speaker too. So, from the time I could walk, I was chasing my brothers, and so by the time we get to the U.S., I start kindergarten athletically, I'm an assassin because like I was advanced hand-eye coordination wise, but in terms of playing with 4 older boys, I had to get smarter in my head because I knew physically I couldn't compete, so I had to be smarter. So this is back in the day, when dodgeball was still allowed in the elementary schools. And so I was imagine this. So Asian girl, 2 pigtails, long hair down to my butt, bangs cut too short, right? And my handle in English was not strong because I got to the States when I was 3, and I was in a household that was predominantly Vietnamese, so my English was not very good. So I was a very quiet kid. But once you got me into gym class and I could understand the rules, they put a dodgeball in my hand, and those poor boys, it felt like a scene from Kill Bill where the Asian girls,
Yes.
the school girls, just like annihilate everyone. And these poor white boys got their asses handed to them because this little Asian girl who doesn't speak a word in class was like, and it was hilarious because my gym teacher at the time was the high school varsity softball coach, was like, this kid right here.
This one has the energy that we need.
This is it. And so from that point on, he was actually grooming me to become one of his softball stars when I hit high school. So as I was growing up through the elementary, he would pit me against the boys in gym class, like your captain picked. So that's what he was doing, was grooming me as a leader. Mm-hmm. Yes. So that was my someone guiding me towards that leadership piece that was happening. And I'm very grateful for it because, that's where I learned to use my voice, because people started looking to me as a leader and taking direction from me.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, because the issue of women in leadership positions, right, that doesn't happen accidentally or coincidentally. Very often athletics in the grade school level, in the high school level, can supply those skills. So you're saying you see that connection there and that it benefited you directly.
Yes, 100%. Had it not been for athletics, I would not be the person I am today. And it gave me the confidence to speak up because people were looking to me to be a leader, and I knew what I was doing. So that was validation. So being able to speak up for myself. I mean, luckily for me, by the time I got to the States, Title IX had already been instated. Mm-hmm. So those opportunities were being made available to women because, you're right. When you see a strong woman leader, intention was behind that because of how this society is set up.
Right.
We don't just naturally happen. It was cultivated.
Yep. Through mentors, through a decision early on that you're going to overcome that expectation.
Yep. And those opportunities are being provided.
Right.
Yeah.
So at what point does this strong leadership enabled young woman decide drag is what I'm going to do? Your persona. Let me go to that instead. The persona that you've created. Mm-hmm. How would you describe him? How did you get there? Is that something you sort of designed and then inhabited, or did you just kind of get in there and find that person?
So there is a lot behind this. Essentially, the way I found my way into drag was I was actually struggling a lot in my personal life. When I discovered drag, honestly, was, I came out, I realized I was gay shortly after undergrad, and it was at the time that my mother was fighting cancer. Mm-hmm. And I made the decision to hide it from my mother because she was fighting the cancer, because when she was diagnosed with cancer my sophomore year of undergrad, she was supposed to be dead by the time I graduated. And so, this is at the time I was starting to get an inkling that I was gay. And so I kept it quiet because I knew she was fighting this cancer and I didn't want her to carry the stress of that on top of fighting for her life. And right. So I made the decision to hide it from her. And someone gave me the opportunity to pursue my master's degree in Ohio, 8 hours away. And I took it so fast because I didn't want her finding out. I didn't want someone spotting me out at the gay bar and word getting back to my family. I would do it again. The way things were, I had to make this decision to hide it from her. And there's some guilt because if you didn't know me, people would say I ran away. I ran away when she was dying. And in ways, but I used my parents' words against them as immigrant Vietnamese family who came to the States to get a new start. My parents always said growing up, get your education, get your education. Someone was offering to pay for my master's degree, doing it in the way I wanted to because it came by way of athletics. I played Division I softball. I tried out for the softball team, even though my parents didn't understand there was opportunity for their daughter in athletics, but I still did it the way I wanted to do it. And someone offered me to get my master's degree. And I said, this is someone's offering me an opportunity. So my parents couldn't say no,
Right.
and their daughter in, traditional Asian households, daughters are kept close by to the home. I was the first kid in the family who really spread my wings, flew the coop 8 hours away. I was the first one in my family as a daughter who got an advanced degree from immigrant family.
That means a lot. That is huge. So congratulations.
Thank you. And I've always been the type of person who, has marched to the beat of my own drum. Like, if my heart feels it, I'm going to go for it. And so at the time when I discovered drag, it was shortly after my mother passed away. And I was a mess. I was a wreck because feeling like I missed the last 2 years of her life because I was a stranger because I was trying to protect her. But that's what I was trying to do. And me and my mother share a special bond. She and I have the same birthday. And I was the ornery kid, like always the kid who always spoke said what I thought and always got smacked around for it. And I'd always say, I'm your favorite. Every single time, I'm your favorite. And I remember my mom knew when she was dying. She passed away March 29th, 2002. Early in the month, I came home to visit her, and whenever I was driving home, I never told my mother when I was coming home because she'd always worry about me being on the road for 8 hours. So I never told her, so it's because I didn't want her to worry. So I would just pop up, be like, hey. And by this time, we had set up shop in our house. Her bed was in the living room. So I, popped in on her, said, hey, I'm home for spring break, spent the time there. And then at the end of the week, I was getting my stuff ready to go, pack the car, drive back home. And my family has never been a family that communicates love. The only time I heard I love you was after I got spanked. It was like, I spank you because I love you, which years of therapy undid. So that's the only time I heard love expressed, right? And my mother, I was standing by the side of her bed, and she grabbed my head and put it to her head and said, I love you and I miss you whenever you go away. That's the last thing my mother ever said to me. And I knew, in hindsight, she knew that was the last time she was ever going to see me. I didn't know it.
She was making her peace with her daughter.
Mm-hmm. And I was too young and in denial to realize what was happening. You can understand the mindset I was in when I discovered drag because I was struggling with all these feelings that I was a lousy daughter, that I let her down, I thought I was protecting her and doing all these things. And I'd gotten this master's degree in a field like athletics, and I thought it was everything I wanted, but realizing I went into an industry that was homophobic. And had someone pulled me aside, hey, do you realize this may not be a good fit for who you are?
Yeah. The level of toxic masculinity. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up in an amazing job. I was 24 years old. I was an assistant athletic director at a college and a head softball coach right out of grad school. On paper, everyone was like, oh, Wynn's killing it. She's killing. She made it. Look at this. And I was suffocating. I was in a place that was not very diverse. I would walk around the town. It was a small, dinky town, and there was someone who said, do you work in the Chinese restaurant? And I was struggling. There was no diversity whatsoever, talking about token minority. I mean, they weren't, I worked under a great boss, and it was not his intention to make me the token, but I was. And I was struggling for community, which I didn't have there. So I would drive an hour away to just have a gay bar or community to just be with others like me. And so that's when I discovered Drag Kings because I needed a voice. And so I decided to put on this persona, Jaden Jameson, because he was a reflection of me, number one, wanting to feel seen in the gay community, because also as an Asian woman, I was not looked at as a potential partner because I wasn't white.
Even within the lesbian community.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was not viewed. Like, because, media as well, it's like viewed as sexy or desirable. Unless you're straight and then, Asian women are fetishized.
Right.
So I wasn't seen as a desirable, dating option. So I'd always constantly get looked over. And so I think Jaden was me trying to lean into, number one, wanting to be seen in the gay community as desirable. Two, not ever having the ability to lean into my sexuality as a strong lesbian woman because, what's lesbian homosexuality? What is the sexuality in there? You don't see that portrayed in media. Like, what does that even look like? And so these were all things I was trying to portray. And the idea, like, my whole entire life that I couldn't be a guy. Like, let me step into this energy that was so taboo for me to be a part of growing up.
Right.
So all of that was happening, and just trying to get the pent up hurt and regret and everything, guilt over my mother's passing. That's what was happening. Because in my own regular life as Quyen, I didn't have the confidence to be able to talk about what I was going through. And so, in a ways, Jaden was my safe way to express what was happening.
Well, that's the beauty of art. And that's what people need to understand, is that drag is an art form. Mm-hmm. And that rather than any of the unhealthy ways of resolving that conflict, that trauma, that loss, you chose art. And you created a persona to put up on the stage that you could then use to bring yourself closer to something healthier and happier. And that's art, man. That's what art is supposed to do.
Yeah.
So such a smart. I mean, I'm saying that as somebody who chose the art form of drinking heavily to deal with my stress. Not a good choice. So to choose that as a way to just immerse yourself, I envy you.
It was fun, and it was like that release that I needed, or else I was going to do something unhealthy. I was going to end up hurting myself if I didn't find this outlet. And being there in a space where people were celebrating me leaning into this character was incredibly validating for me, because what it did was, when I saw how people were resonating with the messages I was putting on stage, I was like, oh, maybe I'm not so alone.
Right.
Maybe other people are feeling what I'm feeling.
Well, that's the sort of thing that one gets from stand-up comedy, right? That you're up there and you're in control of the room, but you're gauging, I don't want to say you're gauging your self-worth, but you're gauging the reactions of the audience to decide if you're doing a good job or not. Mm-hmm. There's that rush of reward and dopamine that you feel when you're hitting it. And there's the opposite when this isn't going anywhere. Mm-hmm. So that takes a lot. And it takes the skills that we talked about a couple minutes ago. It takes that sort of leadership and mental intensity that athletics teaches you to be able to do that. So when you and I met at the vendor room, I knew immediately that I liked Quyen a lot. As my friend Karen was with me, and as we walked away from your booth, she grabbed me by the arm and said, "You need to follow up with you want this conversation on your podcast." So I knew I liked Quyen. Would I like Jaden?
Yes, Jaden is even more suave than me.
Not possible.
Yes.
Not possible.
Yeah, so he's a lot more confident than me. He's the one who walks into a room and commands your attention. Quyen will slink in and be a wallflower, but she will take everything in. Jaden's like, I'm here. When's the party? Come on, I brought the party.
Yeah.
That's him.
That's nice to be able to have the counterpoint.
He gives me a lot of different perspectives, and he's probably me 100% had I grown up in an environment where everyone was like, ooh, but I always grew up in an environment where I was always the other. I never was a person that fit in.
With the intersection of race and culture and gender identity and sexuality, all those things come together to isolate, to alienate.
Yeah.
When that should just be, wow, here's an amazing person. So let's segue, although I just want to keep talking with you about you, but let's segue over to trans tape. I only ever associated this sort of thing with binding, and so maybe we should just start there, since that was my preconception.
Okay. So the thing about trans tape is people wonder why, I use the pronouns she, hers. They're like, how did you come to trans tape if you're not trans?
Oh.
And that's usually one of the first questions people ask. And I discovered the product as a drag king because of my stage. I liked the product because it came in skin tones and offered me the ability to create that illusion on stage so I can take my shirt off and appear masculine. That's the little segue. So trans tape is for anyone who wants to feel comfortable in their bodies. Here are the multiple applications to it. For anyone who has a chest, whether or not you identify as transgender or cisgender, you can use it on your chest. For, let's say, trans men who want to appear like flat or like they have pecs, you can use it to chest bind. Okay. AFAB cisgender women, if you have a halter dress, you can't have bra straps. You can tape yourself up to give yourself cleavage. Trans women, as you start taking hormones, the estrogen, as your chest starts coming in, you want to give yourself a little bit of a bump in cleavage? We can tape you and make yourself look like you have cleavage. Okay.
Let me start with the second one there. I was in the closet for 55 years, and when I would cross-dress, I very often would lament the fact that I couldn't get cleavage. I could stuff a bra with something. I had breast forms, but there are all sorts of things you can't wear if you don't have cleavage. And I tried so many things over the years. I tried duct taping myself. So that alone would have given me hope if somebody had said, okay, well, here's a product and here's how you use it. The first part, I was talking to a transmasculine friend of mine about this conversation we're having, and he was telling me that he has chronic back pain from using ace bandages early on in his transition. So what are the dangers of binding? Because there's athletic tape, there's trans tape, there are binders.
All right. So the nice thing about trans tape that we offer versus chest binders, chest binders are essentially a super tight sports bra. Okay. And the drawbacks about that, number one, is that there's that band that goes around your rib cage. It's meant to be super tight. So therefore, your lung capacity is compromised. Think about this. AFAB individuals, from the time we start puberty until the day we die, our bodies are smushed in bras. So the idea that AFAB individuals from the time you're like 12, no, your lung capacities, forget it. We're going to slap a bra on you. Don't think about breathing. I mean, we've set the bar so low.
Oh, wow.
Think about this.
Yeah.
And so you have that band that goes around your chest. Okay. And then you have straps that go above your shoulders. So your whole entire life, you're spent pretty much hunched over because you're wearing this thing that's compressing you, right? And that's the problem with long-term usage with compression binders. Back problems, ribs being dislocated. I'm hearing this especially with youth, who refuse to take off their chest binders because the dysphoria, which I totally understand. But the thing is, those things are meant to be taken off at night so you can sleep, your body can rest. This is not a good product for a growing body. Skeletally, it's going to inhibit their growth. And what trans tape does is it only tapes from your sternum to the side. So your lungs are able to expand 100%. That's the first thing I noticed when I tape someone. They're like, I can breathe.
An important thing to be
They're
able
like,
to do.
How sad is that? That's the thing is like, oh, I can breathe for once. And the stress is taken off their shoulders now. Now they can actually stand upright. Posture-wise, come on, let's think about osteoporosis. If you're starting this early, and it's not good for the body functionally. So, and the nice thing about trans tape is, number one, it's waterproof. You can wear it for 5 days. And the thing is, there's no long-term, we've heard this about with teens or tweens, who are on their own gender journey and trying to figure it out. Using trans tape, there's no long-term damage to it. Like, let's say they want to try wearing the trans tape. Maybe after a year or so, they realize maybe they're not trans and decide not to use trans tape. There's no long-term damage. Chest growth is not inhibited. So they'll continue along in the regular development. It just provides you that relief until you decide what your next step is.
Well, you and I are going to do a little demonstration after we're finished talking, and that will be available as a video. So there's, in terms of the top, there's binding, where you want to get a more masculine-looking chest. There's the push-up bra effect of creating more cleavage. But there's so much more, right?
Yeah, so you can use trans tape to pack if you want to wear a packer. A packer is a silicone imitation of a penis. If you want to feel affirmed in having a bulge in the front, yes, we can create that illusion for you. And so that's what a packer does for you. And so there's different options. So there's a packer if you just want the bulge. And there's what they call an STP, which is a stand to pee. So as a trans masc person, feeling affirmed, so be able to stand to urinate, that is the STP. So you can attach that to yourself with trans tape. Real quick also, as we are refining our process, you can tuck with trans tape.
Yeah, I have tucking nightmare stories. Okay. We can share them.
So for the people who don't know what tucking is for trans women, if you want to discreetly tuck away your penis using the trans tape, we are refining that process.
Okay, I used to tuck, and oh my God, it was awful. So the tuck, folks who don't know, you take the penis and you pull it back towards your butt, and then you gently put the two testicles back into the cavity from which they descended back when you were hitting puberty. And then you secure them. Now, I secured them with a device called a gaff, which was kind of like a G-string, but it was much tighter. And when so you would secure this thing, and it's awkward and uncomfortable to begin with. But then I would find a whole range of motions. Like, for example, if you're out and you're dressed in femme and you want to cross your legs, this would upset the delicate balance of things. And you would end up with bits of skin making their way out from under the gaff. If you crossed your legs too quickly, it was the exact same sensation of catching a fly ball in the rocks. There's no way of explaining why you're suddenly in nausea-inducing pain, nor is there a way to fix that in public. And so in what way would trans tape be better?
Well, it's cut in a manner that you would eliminate your skin falling out. Because the tape is, you can keep it on for 5 days. So it's adaptable to your body. So we cut it in a manner that the head of your penis would still be exposed so you can urinate, and then still be cut in a manner that your butt cheeks can move freely and not worrying about your penis falling out of place.
Right.
So, yeah.
Oh, that was the other aspect, is that if you're out for the evening, eventually you're going to need to pee. And this whole delicate balance of things just completely fell apart.
Yeah. So, that's the nice thing this people ask with that. So, that way you'll tape yourself in and still be able to pee. Or else, if you want to use for intercourse, you can use it to keep your dildo on and have intercourse with your partner.
Which eliminates some of the harness necessities.
Yeah, it's great because it eliminates all that fiddling. If you're trying to have that intimacy and have a natural course of process in your foreplay, it's an easy, hey, slip this out, pop this in, very little disruption in your intercourse, in your foreplay.
And one of the things you and I had been talking about earlier is that you approach this as intimacy, that the application, the removal, the whole thing can be, instead of that sort of traditional cis het moment where the guy turns to the counter and starts unwrapping the rubber and fiddling it, and by the time he gets it on, the mood is completely lost.
Exactly.
That you're saying that this could be approached in a way to bring the couple together.
Yeah, it can be a shared experience because it's about caring for one another and feeling that you're there mentally, emotionally, physically for your partner to share this experience together. So you can frame it in a manner that you're helping each other. It's not a solo thing where you stick on the trans tape and the dildo. It's a shared thing. And I think honestly, it would probably increase your connection during this period. Yeah.
If we can, let's just, for people who are listening who are not queer sex in general, this is a broad statement, but in general involves a lot more communication. I want to use the word negotiation, but that's the wrong word. But there's a lot more, okay, here's what's okay, here's what's not okay, here's what in the past has made me happy, here's what I'm willing to experiment with, and particularly with trans bodies. So, for example, a trans masculine person who has not had top surgery might say anything in the chest area is off limits. Please don't, because that'll just reinforce the gender dysphoria. Let's just talk a little bit about queer sex, because that might not be familiar to everybody. That sort of give and take that's there with queer sex that isn't necessarily culturally in a cis relationship.
Well, I think in, heterosexual relationships, there's that soul thing that penetration is the end all be all everything. And queer sex, it's not that, and early on people are like, well, what constitutes queer sex? Like, is penetration queer sex? But what if you just have cunnilingus? Is that sex? And so many people in the queer community come to it because they've had traumatic experiences, because most people start out as heterosexual before they realize they're queer, and there's a lot of traumas that come along with that. So when you're in a queer relationship, the communication beforehand, before you even get to that part where you're taking each other's clothes off, like all that is being discussed, learning the person that you're, gonna have sex with. And yeah, it has to be an intentional conversation, because the word is not sensitive, but it's so intimate in queer sex to have those conversations, to have those connections, because of how society has treated us and how we've come to this community. And I think it's probably our biggest responsibility to take care of one another in those types of situations, because it can help affirm our place in the community, or else even end up isolating us from our own communities.
Sure. If you feel like, okay, I opened myself up in that moment and wasn't heard, wasn't respected, yeah, you're more likely to withdraw. This is going to sound snarkier than I mean it to be, but in that sort of cis-het model, they even have the bases, right, that you learn about in elementary school. So you have this incredibly skewed and ridiculous version, but at least a sense of, okay, so I'm supposed to try, we're supposed to do this first, and then we do this, and then we do this, and if I can do those three things successfully, I get to do this. And there's a sense of, okay, that is what will be fulfilling for you. So that's what you need. That's the path you need to follow. And there are so many more possibilities, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually, for that kind of intimacy in a queer relationship. I just think makes it wonderful. And it makes me wish that all relationships could be like that.
I mean, I love being a part of the gay community. I don't know what year it was, but when homosexuality was taken out of the psychology books
The DSM,
as a mental disorder,
yeah.
Part of accepting that I was gay was freeing too, because I was a sexual deviant. So I was like, oh my God, I can do all the things that I thought were taboo. It's like, what?
That's once the rules are off.
Right,
Yeah.
the rules are off. I'm like, I can play with your butt.
That.
And so it was great, because the second I accepted that and I could do all the taboo things, it allowed me to be sexually freer with myself, because there was no preconceived notion of what what was okay or wasn't okay. As long as you communicated it with who you were with and there was consent, it was game on.
And you get to see what it is you like and you get to see what it is your partner likes, and you realize that there are no universal. There's so many different ways to feel good and to make somebody else feel good.
Yeah, that's what, and I, talk about, sex sometimes on my social media because I like bringing up these topics because people are like, hush, hush.
Stop that with the sex thing.
God forbid I said orgasm on my social media, but I like talking about these things because people don't. And, it goes hand in hand with trans tape and helping people feel know what feels good on their bodies. And it's not sick or gross to do the things that it makes your body sing. I do this because, I talk about sex, what feels good, what I like, what I don't like, trans tape, how I like it taped on myself and how it feels good to me when I'm out in the sun and feeling the sun on myself because I can take my shirt off and not worry about predators, looking at my chest and, just as like much of all the other things I love to do with life, like what makes your body feel good? What makes your heart sing? What makes your body feel good?
Yeah. And if you don't, you should put in the time, put in the effort, and find out because the rewards are so much worth it.
Well, that's what life is about, finding the things that make you happy and what you're happy about being alive for. If we're, slugging through life and not paying attention to the things that catch our interest, I'd encourage everyone to explore the things that catch your eye, what catches your interest. What is it that's grabbing your attention? Because something's telling you something and you need to pay attention to that because it may actually be the key to rewarding life.
And that sort of alienation and isolation that we had talked about earlier, which leads to just awful things like depression and self-loathing. You can counter that by listening to, okay, well, if I'm noticing that this is the case, this is catching my eye, this is important to me, I feel good when I'm doing this or when I'm being this. That's not coincidental. That's, you should be paying attention to that.
Exactly. And I know sometimes people don't do that because they're like, well, I feel like I'm the only one and that I know is interested in this thing. It doesn't matter. Dive into it because you will find your own group. Yeah. They will find you. You're not alone. Trust me.
The vast majority of shouldn'ts that we feel are lies. I spent 5 decades telling myself that I shouldn't be this way. I shouldn't feel that. I shouldn't do that. And my time would have been so much better spent if I had listened to that and disregarded the shouldn'ts.
Well, here's the thing. Yeah, you should go out there, make a living so you can support yourself. But if you're miserable doing it, it's not worth it because life's not worth it if you're not happy with yourself. And I'm very introverted and I think about what drives me and things like that. And the thing I've noticed is that I love helping people find themselves, whether or not it's through teaching my drag king workshops, teaching people realize that reality for themselves, or else I'm teaching youth how to tape with trans tape because at the end of it, we're building each other up. And we all know as elders in the community now, had we had the support and the regular development like everybody else did, we would have gotten there sooner with the support and love that we needed. We'd be so much further with our lives. But we were so busy spending the first half of our lives pretending to be someone we weren't. And the second people start feeling good about themselves, they're more apt to go after their dreams. And, I've never seen someone miserable chasing their dreams.
Yeah.
Right?
You feel stuck. It's a conversation I just had with a therapist for an episode that's hopefully coming out this Friday. But that's the common phrase, is that I feel stuck. I can't make the decisions that I need to get out of this thing that I'm in. And a lot of that comes down to shouldn't. I can't make those decisions. I can't take those actions because I shouldn't be openly trans. I shouldn't tell anybody about this because it's going to inconvenience them. And those are just lies.
Yeah. A lot of it's fear-based.
Yeah.
And what does it come back to? No one's going to love you. The people who are going to love you will love you.
Yeah.
And the other people who show that they're not worth it, they're not worth it to you. But it's a hard lesson to learn because, a lot of these people that you loved and trusted, and when they show you otherwise, it hurts. It hurts like hell.
Yeah.
And then you end up, unfortunately, you have to grow that second skin. But it gives you the lens to see people for who they are. We don't make excuses for other people. I always say, let them show you who they are. Don't make excuses for them. The people who will love you.
That has been the greatest joy in the last 5 years since I came out, is that I am now 100% confident that anybody who says they like me or love me or care about me, they do. Because they're seeing the me that I knew about for 55 years. And that every time somebody said, I love you, I care about you, I think you're really cool, there was the voice that in the back of the head that said, no, you don't, because you don't know me. Well, now you do. This is me. And if you can look at me and say, you're really cool, they mean that. And it is that level of confidence that changes. It's a game changer.
Yeah. I mean, you're walking taller because you're proud of who you are.
Where can people find you on the stage?
No, I'm in and out. I have so many different things because I've been in the field I've been in the drag industry for 18 plus years. I perform a little bit. I just got done with Magic Dyke this past weekend. Sold out.
Magic Dyke.
Yes. It was so good. Yeah. I live for that show every time. It happens a couple times a year. So whenever they book me, I'm like, yes. But now I'm heading into my Kingdom Drag King workshop. I run a 5-week Drag King workshop where they get 8 hours instruction followed by a tech rehearsal and a show. So I'm launching 10 new Drag Kings.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's so exciting.
Yeah, it's really exciting. And, the community has come out big time for it to support it because we see the need to promote that visibility in the community. Like I was saying earlier, the more people see diverse drag in the drag industry, they'll see a place for themselves. And more people are coming out. We also like people of color on stage. One of the most telling things I ever heard in my life, when I did the workshop prior to pandemic, I had an Asian woman in the class. One of the questions we ask is, why are you here? And her response was, I had friends that did drag. I didn't know I could do it until I saw you. For someone who has walked in my footsteps my whole entire life, knowing that any type of environment I was walking into, I was always going to be the person that didn't fit in. And I learned to accept that. I knew that was going to be the case every single time, especially, on the athletic field, like a little Asian girl in the pitching spot. I was the pitcher. So I was directing the whole entire field and everyone's looking at me as this little Asian girl, like, holy cow, but not realizing other people not seeing themselves reflected on the stage was a neon saying, you don't belong here. And I forget that privilege I have as a drag king because in preparation, I'm like, okay, where's my music? Where are my numbers? What's my costumes? Do I know my lyrics? Blah, 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 X, Y, Z of the art form. But I forget that the first thing that people notice when I step on stage is I'm a sexy Asian guy.
Yeah.
And that in itself turns people's heads because you don't see that. So it's not lost on me what, just in terms of just my visibility alone provides for the community.
That's wonderful. Thank you. This has been a delight.
Well, you're welcome. Thanks for having me. It's just, it's about, once again, I can't get over it, like helping people be comfortable in their bodies and being the best versions of themselves. And if that means physically, mentally, emotionally, that's the work we need to do.
You don't suppose I can get away with saying wicked pissa a second time in one podcast, do you? No. Yeah, you're probably right. So, there you go. Some resources for my queer listeners, some insights into drag for my cis het listeners. Everybody goes away happy. My thanks to Quyen for being so open and generous with her story. If you let me know where and when Jaden is appearing next, I'll not only promote the event, but I'll try to be there. This has been Transqat. I'm Claire McCarthy. Thank you so much for listening. Let's talk soon.
This is Sadie McCarthy. I'm Claire's niece. Transqat is a production of Transqat Enterprises, LLC. Copyright 2022, all rights reserved. Join us on the web at transqat.com. That's TRANSQAT.com. There, you'll find links to Transqat, the blog, writing projects, speaking engagements, and more. You can also meet the team who thought spelling cat with a Q was a good idea. Follow Transqat on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Leave us a comment on whatever platform you use to stream this podcast. Just remember to be kind. She has enough self-esteem problems already. To reach Claire with a question or a suggestion for an upcoming episode, just use the contact page at the website or email her directly at crmtranscat@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.